Hi, everyone. Welcome to Making the Business Case for Trust and Safety. My name is Matt Soeth, the head of community here at Spectrum Labs for the Trust and Safety Collective. Trust and safety often has the moniker of being reactive, right? For many years it has, thinking about your policies, enforcements, moderation practices. I always think of the concerned parent as just like, oh, no one thinks of the children, like very like going down to the school board meeting or to the local church and just trying to get everyone to be like pitchforks and, flamethrowers and be like, let's go get the bad stuff. But the reality is, as times have shifted, trust and safety has taken more of a seat in the forefront. Companies thinking about how do we implement this from the beginning versus reactively, right? Because if we can build it in the front, way less work in the back end. So as we think about this proactive approach, proactive approach. I think I just combined some words there. We have some amazing panelists here, folks who've been in the space for a while, individuals who are building apps, individuals who've started trust and safety teams to kind of get their take on like, hey, how do you make the business case for trust and safety? So we're kicking off. We're going to be going alphabetically here. So we will start off with Aoife. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Aoife McGuinness and I'm the Trust and Safety Manager at Wildlife Studios. And Wildlife is one of the biggest mobile gaming companies in the world. And I've been there for just over 2 years. I was initially hired to build the trust and safety function from the ground up. So essentially that means that I've spent the last 2 years building policies and operational guidelines, building our risk matrices and policy safety feature specifications, along with hiring, building and training a team.
I love it. Next up, we have Dio.
Hi, I'm Dio Akinrinade, and I'm the founder and CEO of Wisdom App. We are a new VC-funded social audio app, and the founding mission of the app is to democratize access to mentorship. So in essence, Wisdom is we're an open audio community of knowledge seekers and experts and mentors. We were recently featured as Apple's App Store of the Day. And I think in terms of my feature today, being responsible for an audio community, it's in essence to make sure it remains and it is a safe and open community.
Emily.
Yes. Hi, I'm Emily McDonald. I'm the VP of Trust and Safety at Remind. Remind is a communication platform that reaches students and families and supports learning wherever it happens. We're home to one of the largest free services in education, a school communication business that supports millions of students. And we also have an online tutoring solution for help outside the classroom. I joined Remind almost 8 years ago, and I initially joined the support team. And it was through leading that team that I found that I gravitated toward trust and safety work. It was the questions from the concerned parents and the data privacy conscious administrators that really drew me in for a couple reasons. One, back in the early days, we didn't have all of the answers to those questions that we were starting to be asked. So it was super exciting to build out trust and safety from scratch, defining what it meant, what our priority strategies were, building the team. And then also those questions that involved security, legal, they felt really high stakes to me, and it seemed to be where I can have the highest impact. And I'm now an executive at Remind and really excited to be here today.
And Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Hanlon. I'm the Senior Director of Customer Care and Education at Together Labs. Together Labs is probably most known for InView, which has been around since 2004. Really started the metaverse almost 20 years ago. I joined in 2009, initially responsible for primarily customer care, but in our organization that actually includes content moderation, trust and safety, and all of those things. So we were highly reactive for the majority of the company's existence. So many people in this panel deal with all of the reactive flags that come in from our users, and we find ways to try to streamline that as much as we can. But it's become clear that that's no longer what we should be doing. It's not the best thing for us because you aren't protecting the people that aren't flagging. And so this has been a particular interest to me, innovating in the space and evolving what we're doing, because I see firsthand the kinds of things we do get, and I worry about the things that we don't. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about all the innovations and what we've got going on right now.
All right. Now you know why I'm all excited about this panel. We have an amazing group of experts, a huge range of backgrounds and experiences in tech, which I always find super fascinating in these conversations. So kicking it off, Dio, we're going to start with you because you are the quote unquote executive founder. But thinking about, as you've started this app, what was important to you to implement trust and safety in there, right? Because one of our questions is, how do you get leadership buy-in? How do we sort of make sure that this is happening from the beginning? So what are some ways that you're prioritizing sort of safety by design and making sure that that is the framework that you're going by over at Wisdom?
So, and I think it's really apt that the title of our webinar today is the business case for trust and safety. So with Wisdom being an audio community, and we use social audio to connect people, oftentimes strangers, for one-to-one conversations. And the conversations are around mentoring and, in essence, mentoring and knowledge exchange. And our North Star metric at Wisdom is conversations that matter. So every design decision and every business decision can always be traced back to saying, is this something that is going to help a member of Wisdom have a conversation that matters to them? And I think in order to have like deep, meaningful conversations, there needs to be vulnerability. And I think that there isn't vulnerability without safety. So in essence, it sort of means that safety is baked into the business case for Wisdom. And even anecdotally, when I have conversations, if I go live on the app and I speak to members of the community, it's something that even the community members will frequently say, that I feel safe on Wisdom. Sometimes people will speak about other social platforms and say, well, I didn't really feel safe there, or maybe I felt I got trolled there or harassed there. But they do sort of think, Wisdom is a safe space. So I think, to your point, from me, from the onset of founding Wisdom, and I think also with myself personally being a woman in tech and also a Black woman in tech, so with that intersectionality, perhaps I had a high level of awareness, and it was a priority to me to ensure that we did take a safety by design approach. And from launching, even from day one, being sure that we had a number of safety features in place, and to continue to build on them. And I think sometimes some of the safety features, I had to be willing to take a trade-off in terms of perhaps versus growth or other metrics. So I would say, for example, to sign up for Wisdom, we do use social verification. So you need to connect at least a couple of your social networks externally by way of verification. So I'm aware that does provide sort of some friction within the sign-up process, but then I had to be willing to make that trade-off to then trust that there is a solid business case in having like a safe, community. And I mean, similarly on Wisdom, we have invested in 24/7 moderation, and that's actually like proactive moderation. So those are moderators that will, proactively listen in and keep an eye on conversations. And then, of course, in terms of the future roadmap, we do want to move more towards maybe predictive, algorithmic, like detection of conversations as well.
I love that thinking of, implementing that from the beginning, right? It's a very proactive way of approaching this. Kind of like Emily, you've been there for a while, thinking from ed tech, and what Dio just shared, like how have you sort of approached the leadership buy-in component to making sure, because I working with youth, working with minors, working with schools, like privacy is definitely a very top priority there.
Yeah, and so I would actually like to take us back to something that you mentioned in the intro, which is the shift to being proactive. And I think it'll help set the stage if I kind of share how we have seen that happen. So for us in education communication, the big shift to being proactive was actually when texting was becoming super common and teachers started giving out their personal cell phone numbers, right, to communicate with students and parents outside the classroom. And this was great for education outcomes. All of a sudden, you as a student could access your teacher outside of class after hours and get help. And it enhanced collaboration between parents and teachers. And so it was really this kind of new expectation that teachers were available on their personal devices, on their personal time, that brought some novel privacy and safety concerns, not to mention actually labor and union concerns as well. Teachers using personal devices again and working on personal time. And so Remind really one of the foundational pieces of Remind is to enable these relationships to be built. And Daya, what you said about conversations that matter resonated, because what we talk about are meaningful communication. So I think it's kind of a similar thing. But to support this education ecosystem with working towards improving student outcomes and setting students up for success, trust and safety has to be it can't be bolted on after the fact, right? We have to build everything we do with trust and safety and privacy top of mind. And so you of course do need leadership buy-in. You need leadership buy-in for any resource ask you're going to make at any company. And the return on investment can be harder to articulate when you are trying to quantify the value of avoiding a hypothetical scary scenario due to careful planning. Is not quite as straightforward a calculation as adding somebody to the sales team, right? You can calculate how that'll impact bottom line. And so, what I've seen at Remind is a leadership team that holds the health and well-being of humans, so students, internal employees, as one of our very topmost priorities. And for anybody listening in today, if you're looking for a company like that, you can often find those statements in company mission statements, and you should be able to assess by doing some research and speaking with leadership if that is a company that is likely to set a trust and safety team up for success, and if you'll be able to have a really big impact through your work there.
No, I love it. And kind of switching gears over to the gaming side, Aoife, throw it over to you. I know, having built up sort of a trust and safety team at Wildlife, what has been your success or tactics for getting leadership buy-in?
I mean, in terms of leadership buy-in, I think from the outset, anything you want to do is going to need leadership buy-in. It's essential to get things moving at initial stages, but not only do you need leadership buy-in, I always say you need leadership stay-in. Trust and safety is very much so not just a one and done type scenario. There's always going to be continuous improvements and iterations that you'll need to make. So you need to have leadership invested in the whole journey. In terms of ways that I have gone about getting leadership buy-in, I find the most effective way is to continuously use data to display and to frame the impact that the team is having. So personally, I do this by showing graphs on a weekly basis in our leadership meetings that show the prior week's volume of caseload that the team actually handled, along with the breakdown of the categories of cases that the team have worked on. And I find that to be a really effective way because the caseload that we work on is quite high, right? So this method really demonstrates the huge need that we have in trust and safety. So for me, I find that that's the most effective way that I can get buy-in, but then also maintain it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, thinking about data or communication. So Jeff, kind of thrown over to you, because and you're at Together Labs, but InView has been around a while, right? So thinking about an established platform, so to speak, how do you go about, being at a point where it's just hey, we got some stuff we can do, here's how we should make it happen, and we need your support.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, InView was the original lean startup, right? There's a book written about us from Eric Ries, and the whole methodology of getting a minimum viable product out the door as fast as you can and making a case for it and then improving upon it from there based on user feedback, that's InView. And the culture still exists today. We talk about the next minimum viable product for a feature or something like that, get it out the door and then see how users respond. So the whole idea of getting buy-in for trust and safety is difficult, super challenging at the beginning of a product's life cycle when, those of us in this space, we say it's got to be there. It's got to be there. You can't roll out a product without having some sort of trust and safety built into it. So when I came through the door over 12 years ago, we had reactive flagging, and it's done its thing for the life of our company. Millions of things get flagged every year. Our team is awesome and super fast at responding to those with a 20 to 30% guilty rate. So a lot of things come to us that shouldn't be coming to us, but we respond to all of them with humans to date. And we were leaving so much out there that wasn't getting reviewed. And our journey toward getting more investment was a long one. Actually, almost 2 years ago, we knew we needed to do something. So it was actually our VP of marketing, Mara Welch, and I, who really started digging in and figuring out where we were today, what our challenges were from outsiders looking in, whether it be potential investors or new users, and that kind of experience. They come through the door and they're bombarded with over-sexuality and toxicity and some other behaviors that scare people away and maybe attract others that we don't want to keep, right? Because they're finding that compelling, and it's not the platform that we wanted to be from a brand perspective, really, from people looking into us. We have two other arms of the company: a teen-focused app called With Me, which is built on the foundation of friendship and positivity. We have our cryptocurrency arm. There are a lot more people looking at Together Labs from the outside in, and so from a brand perspective, we need to focus on that. So that part was easy, understanding that as a company, from a brand perspective, we need to do this. And then it's just a matter of creating a mission statement for what we wanted to change, what behaviors we wanted to change, how we wanted to improve things, and what it could potentially mean for the company. Me, of course, being in this space for so long, I think morally we have no option, right? This is absolutely, I see the kids are in danger and the people we're trying to protect and all these things every day. I know we can do more, but building a business case, it speaks the language of an executive team who has to jockey things around budget and people to get this done. So it was a long haul over a year-long process to make a case for doing more. And in our case, that means using artificial intelligence to track behaviors and elevate things as necessary. And so far, we're tackling it one piece at a time and being super methodical. Chat is our product, right? Sure, we have a virtual space and a virtual economy and all the things that go along with that. But if we don't have chat, if people aren't coming for the chat, then we don't have a product. We don't exist. And so we have to be very delicate at how we do things. Our first foray into any sort of automated redaction was on hate speech, which is relatively fresh. We just did this not long ago. And I'm just overwhelmed with hope, because we're finding that it actually didn't negatively impact the company, right? Some people were fearing that people come for toxicity, that we don't want to harm the language in some ways. We need free speech and all this other stuff. We had never had guardrails before, really. People could say what they wanted to say. And some people were shocked by that, and so this was our first attempt. And so far it's overwhelmingly positive. People aren't coming to complain to us that they can't say hateful things. And in fact, we're seeing super encouraging early results from new users who are seeing less toxic behavior in a room. And so the important part for me now, I'm sorry for rambling a little bit, but is that I take this data back and share it with everyone who's been involved to date, because there's a lot of question from the executive team, from even engineers working on this project who have their own opinions about things. And the more real world data I can share to say, look what we changed and look what it did to these numbers and look at the stuff we removed. This is overwhelmingly positive, and we change minds every day when people see the results. And I'm so excited to continue doing more.
No, I love it. Honestly, data, those kind of stories get me just really excited about tech. I remember my first experience with data was I was at a math teacher who's like, hey, if you have 100 feet of rope, how many dog leashes can you make? And I'm like, I'm never going to use this information. I don't know how to apply this. I don't plan on using dog leashes for much outside of walking my dog, and I'll just go buy one. This is not the data that helps me. That part aside, thinking about data, jumping back over to Dio, what are kind of some of the metrics and stuff that Wisdom is keeping an eye on in order to sort of inform whether it's policies, features, or how these interactions happen?
Yeah, so I think with Wisdom being an early stage startup, as I'm sure you can imagine, when it comes to metrics, and we do measure everything, we use Amplitude to track probably far too many events, but we do measure everything. And I think with balancing this business case for trust and safety, of course, I think the metrics that will sometimes come to the forefront are related to our customer acquisition funnel and how we acquiring members, and how active and engaged are they along the platform. But I think from a trust and safety perspective, it is important, and we do also monitor metrics relating to safety, particularly, and whether that's internally from our moderators, sort of proactively flagging incidents, and then sometimes even I find looping back afterwards to validate. So like we have sort of tried to put in a sort of reasonably efficient back-end queue process. So from when a potential incident is flagged, but being audio, we need to know like the time and the duration and why and what penalty has been imposed. But then also I think sometimes following that feedback loop to understand, for example, maybe if something sexual was said, but then looking at the context, this person is a sex educator, therefore it's been said within a like a responsible context, and that should be okay, because sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't get it right, and this is our creators' content, which they are very passionate about, but I do find that the community are very appreciative of our efforts, and where, for example, before anyone starts a live talk on Wisdom, every time you need to check a box to say you opt into our conduct policy. So you're re-opting into our policy every time before you create a piece of content. And what I'm finding is it has a positive effect through the community, where sometimes the community will kind of remind each other as well, and we'll get messages in the back end saying, I don't think this person is right for Wisdom, or they don't have their heart in the right place. Like, I think, when your communities start kind of applying the values and living the values, which, I take as a positive sign. And then I think, to your point, maybe another aspect why it is key for us to track trust and safety metrics, even though Wisdom, we are primarily an American company and we have American members, but I am based in the UK. And within the UK at the moment, through the government, there is the online safety bill, which it's been drafted and being discussed for the past few years. And the online safety bill, it is taking, I would say, a tougher stance on trust and safety. And the government has referred to phrases of saying that we're no longer going to allow the network operators to mark their own homework, because supposedly they haven't maybe done a great job. And I think that's definitely a signal, I would say, to companies. And I think something that maybe is quite encouraging about the proposed trust and safety bill is it is taking an intersectional approach. So they have sort of ratified the bill into looking at areas like harm to children, but also misogyny, racism, disability, and really sort of recognizing that maybe people who are intersectional or marginalized are going to, potentially be subjected to a different type of harm and are potentially more vulnerable, which I think is, really encouraging. And I mean, there are also things being proposed, like the government wanting to be able to audit algorithms that are influencing, the user experience. And, and I think overall, it is positive to sort of say that network operators have like a duty of care to their users and, to kind of want to keep them safe. And at the same time, I think, we still need to strike a balance where I do believe online communities to an extent are a reflection of what is happening in real life. And I think the same way when people are physically meeting in the world, sometimes there can be issues. And when they meet online, there can be issues as well. So I think I welcome like thoughtful regulation, but I just think it's important that we, get like a reasonable balance.
Yeah, and in terms of regulation, there's so much happening right now, right? So you have the UK Online Harms Bill. There's a EU Commission, like 28 countries coming together to propose like new restrictions about age verification, et cetera. It's a wide landscape. As we think about this, as platforms, I'm curious to get folks' reaction, particularly with so many companies being global, right? Like, how do we, or what are your thoughts in terms of going to your company and be like, hey, if you notice there's this new law coming and we kind of have to do something, right? Like how are folks thinking about that? And I don't know, either Aoife or Jeff will kind of throw it to you, in terms of does that become a tool and resource to go to your company and be like, hey, we kind of have to do this, right? Or is it more of like, how do we work with governments and stuff to make sure that this is an informed decision?
It's tricky because we don't know where these are going to settle, right? What the law is ultimately going to be. I use it as a bit of an ammunition to say something is coming, right? Whether it's in the UK or in the US or some other country, and we have to respond. And it's clear that means we have to do more, right? So I get the support where I can today and realize that, this most recent step into being more proactive about how we respond to certain situations is only going to put us in a much better position when the time comes, whatever that thing is. What if that thing is you need to be more proactive about, minor safety and all these behaviors. One thing I didn't mention earlier was that one of the first things that we got from more proactively keeping an eye on certain behaviors and stuff was that we found a lot of teens lying about their age. Not surprising, right? So in chat, they were admitting it. And previously, we had to rely on someone else in the chat reporting that the user lied about their age. It didn't match the adult age that was on their profile. And we've seen, teens or kids as young as 10 or 11 admitting their real age in a very awkward and uncomfortable chat with an adult even. And we wouldn't have seen any of that before. We've increased the number of accounts we banned for age misrepresentation tenfold as a result of this. So we're automatically making teens safer, primarily teens safer. And then we keep monitoring. So when they go out there and create the next account and they slip up again, we're going to find it, even if they said they were an adult when they created their account. So my stance is ammunition for doing more now. Don't wait, because it's coming.
Yeah, I'm the exact same. I use it for ammunition, and it's exactly like what you've said. I say, like, something is coming. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like yet, but the more that we can do now, the better position that we are going to be in when something does come. So yeah, exactly like you said.
No, and you both hit on something I think really smart, right? Because there's already some regulation in place. You have COPPA, you have SIPA. Here in the U.S., you have those laws represented throughout other parts of the globe, both in the UK and Europe. So I think there's a base level, right? Like every platform is going to have, like, whether it's regulated illegal goods or, reporting CSAM, like that's kind of your entry level that will definitely bring large fines or potentially could get your platform shut down, right? Which we saw sort of in the early days of tech, like 7 years ago. But as we start to enforce that, like, it's very clever. I want to come back to something. I know, Emily, this is really big at Remind, but there's a very unique data point that I'm always fascinated by, and that is user surveys. And I know you have a very distinct group that you work with. And so thinking about, like, how, just as another form of, like, kind of collecting data to sort of inform decision-making, product features, stuff like that. I was wondering if you could share some more on that topic.
Yeah, definitely. So the stakeholders that we've been most focused on for these surveys have been our school and district administrators. And what we're doing is twice a year, so roughly at the beginning and the end of the school year, we'll send like an in-app, it'll send emails and also an in-app little modal that's sort of NPS style, but it says, how safe and secure do you consider Remind on a scale of actually 1 to 7, where 1 is not at all safe and secure and 7 is the most safe and secure. And admittedly, we've only launched one of these, so we have just a baseline, and we will, use that as a way to partly see what the impact is of different features we may launch, or different behaviors that we're seeing. And we do also use it as a way to learn what to invest in. So we do have some open text fields on those questions, and they may give us input. And then in addition to those kind of regular in-app surveys, we also ran a larger survey last year that dug in a little bit more, and it was to our current school and district administrators, and then some who have signed up but don't have an actual paid account with us, so kind of our prospect and currently paid administrators. And we asked both groups what features they'd like to see, and then even talk about, justifying your roadmap to leadership. We directly asked, would you pay for this feature? And I think the question was phrased like, how valuable would this be to you? Not valuable at all. Like, I wouldn't even use this if you built it and gave it to me for free. Somewhat valuable. I would totally use it, but I'm not going to pay extra for it. Or very valuable. I will pay more money to have this in place. And then we asked, would you be willing to have us follow up with you? And so then we were able to set up a bunch of conversations with these folks to really learn what their needs are. Schools and districts obviously have common themes, right? They're all serving families and students, but they operate so differently in terms of how much they want to empower the kids and bring them online and have them learn how to be digital citizens, or how much they want things controlled. So, there's never going to be one solution that fits all, but we like to provide options. So features that districts can choose what the default class settings should be at their district. Like, should everybody in a class be able to see everybody else and message them depending on your age and role, or not? So we try to keep a close pulse on our administrators right now, both the trust and safety team, and actually I should give a shout out to our user research team as well. They do a bunch of that. And then of course, listening to our sales teams and our customer service and support teams, like they are speaking with these folks every day. So making sure that we've got some pretty good processes to learn about that product feedback as well. So just listening to your users, which I think is not unique, but very important.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like anyone else here do user research or have the resources for that?
We did actually, because we knew this was such a big change, the sort of proactive response. We did a baseline survey. It wasn't quite as swanky as Emily's. I really want that, the ability to continually check in on people to see if they're safe. But we did do a baseline survey right before we started our first redaction step. And for those who don't know, from the language at least, redaction means real-time redaction. Someone tries to say something and it doesn't get delivered to the recipient. We're stopping it from being delivered in real time. So we wanted to get our baseline survey, see where people feel today, and then it gives us a place to follow up on, after this has been in the wild, say the first behavior, and let's say we try to curb overtly sexual conversations between teens, for example, in a public space, that, we gauge the response to that. So we're looking at the numbers from like revenue standpoints and retention and all the normal, internet metrics that one tracks. But we do have the user component as well.
Yeah, we've done one as well recently enough. After we launched our safety center, I really wanted to see kind of what sort of an impact that's having on people. Has it made a difference? Do people know now where to go to report harmful content in game? So I put out a survey a couple weeks back in conjunction with our privacy team. So we asked, a portion of trust and safety questions and a portion of privacy questions, and was really happy. We ended up getting really good results from it and feedback from it, and seeing that people are actually utilizing our safety center and now feel safer in game because they know exactly where to go to report something. And they also know like, what is the flow? Like what happens after I report something? Like what do the trust and safety team actually do with it? So
yeah, no, I love that. That even just communicating those steps, right? And so someone kind of has an expectation of outcome in some way that someone's looking at it, it's actually being handled, is such a huge piece. I have one question I want to come back to, but thinking about working across teams, right? So Emily, you kind of brought this up in terms of informing product and other stuff. Like there's a lot of moving parts in a platform, from product to engineering to policy, and they all communicate very differently. Even up to the executive level, right? Where like time may be limited. So I'm curious for folks kind of what are strategies you used in terms of communicating trust and safety across those different teams? Obviously, like data is one tool, but thinking about other ways to kind of get that information to them to show that, you know, this trust and safety mindset is actually enhancing the platform experience for the user base.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start on that one. So working with product, you want your trust and safety team to be seen as a partner, right? A partner who is going to help mitigate launch risks, right? Like product wants that. Okay, we have the same goals. And go so far as to co-write the product briefs for some new features that are going to launch that need the most trust and safety help. Be available for gut checks, brainstorm, just be accessible. And then in terms of like, you know, communicating the importance of trust and safety across the company, not just with product, but including with leadership, you'll want to frame trust and safety as a team that can provide paths forward, that can help greenlight new use cases, that can help other teams achieve their goals. So if your marketing team has a goal of generating X sales leads, team up with marketing to give them some really solid trust and safety talking points. Arm them with some of the ways that you are best in class, like share your best practices and work with them to create collateral that they can then use to build out campaigns to hopefully, you know, and even equip the sales team, like let's, you know, get some more sales. So yes, we're here to protect our users and their data, but we are here to set the company up to achieve its goals. So tying trust and safety back to company, product, like all other teams' goals and initiatives and demonstrating your impact in that way, I think will take you pretty far.
I agree, totally. And I think one of the reasons that my job has been so much easier is that early on, I have a peer, a cross-functional peer in our VP of marketing to help drive that. I mean, a no-brainer. She's in, all in, fully in. So she's tackling it from a brand and marketing perspective, but it could have just as easily been our VP of acquisition. You know, who's responsible for getting new users in the door, right? Because we want to attract the right kind of new users. We want them to convert and all those other things. But having someone else that's outside of my space to champion things has been a big help for us.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, Matt, you know, it takes a ton of teams to work on trust and safety. You know, I always say at Wildlife, my team work with the most teams across the business. So like Emily, we're working with everyone from engineering, legal to product and QA and even localization and player support. And for me, I find the best way to get all areas of the company thinking about trust and safety is to give as much insight into our work as we can. And how I do this is essentially by posting in our company-wide Slack channels about things we do. For example, like when we launched the Safety Center, or even giving an update about the number of cyber tip reports that we have submitted to the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children the year before. You know, I find this to be really effective because it not only does it give company-wide visibility, it allows anyone in the company to comment or ask questions on what we're doing, which can go a really long way. And then in terms of working with product teams specifically, I always give the same advice, which is to create a document that is accessible company-wide, which lists all of the possible social features a product team could create, and then list all of the risk that those features could pose, along with possible solutions on how to mitigate those risks. And once you share this, you know, you'll be really surprised how much you can educate the product and engineering teams on trust and safety and on risk mitigation. And, you know, you have to understand that a lot of the time engineers and product teams, they don't necessarily always think about the way the features that they create could be used for harm. So I always think collaborating with the teams and educating them as much as possible is so important. And that's what I found has worked best for me.
And just to add in, I think something Aoife mentioned struck a chord with me around obviously with Wisdom being a smaller team, smaller startup, the communication all around is really easy, and we have the tools like Slack and Jira and things. But when it comes to the product roadmap and looking ahead to what we want to build out, and of course being a startup, we have to be very prioritized in terms of what we're going to work on. But where the features are sort of grouped into categories, like sort of we have about maybe 6 swim lanes. One of them is trust and safety. So it's always there on the framework next to other things, perhaps like maybe acquisition and engagement. So it means that whenever anything goes on the board, you can kind of look across to the safety column and be like, should something be in there? Like, what is the implication? Because I think, yeah, to your point, an engineer isn't necessarily always thinking about that, but as I look for different ways to help the community on Wisdom connect and engage, we always still have to be thinking, is this safe? Will people feel safe within this? Because I think, because we've mentioned a lot of the times, if users don't feel safe, sometimes they won't return, they won't churn, they won't feel it's a space where they can just come and go live and express that their inner thoughts. So yeah, I think for us, keeping trust and safety sort of within the swim lanes of the features, just make sure that we don't forget about it, and we always think about the implications of anything we build.
As we close things out for this session, thinking more optimistically, what is something or some things you've noticed that shows that trust and safety is becoming more proactive versus reactive? We touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but I'm just kind of curious if there's something in your worldview that you're just like, oh, this line of work's getting pretty darn good.
I have something that comes to mind for that, actually. The first thing that I thought of is all of the trust and safety communities and networks that either I just didn't put enough effort into finding 8 years ago when I joined Remind, or didn't exist. So back when I was leading the support team, which is how I mentioned I kind of fell into trust and safety work, all of the sort of moderation and safety and online harms, like we were talking about it, but as support leaders, and it was something like the support team handled, and my network was support leaders. And it was, only kind of relatively recently that I've seen so many different associations and online and other communities that bring together people like this. So, conferences that are dedicated to trust and safety. And I will say that in education, safety, they've been having student safety conferences for a long time. It's less new there because student safety it has always been top of mind for schools and districts. But in the tech community, I just, over the last few years, I'd say, have just seen so many more resources and so much more collaboration and so many more conversations. And so that's something that I see that makes me really optimistic.
Yeah, and to mirror Emily there, I think, over the last number of years, there's become a much more heightened awareness of the fundamental need for trust and safety, which in turn has led companies to have a heightened sense of social responsibility over their platforms. And even in education, the trust and safety field as a whole has become proactive. And what I mean by that is, as Emily was saying, when I first started my trust and safety career, there was a job that I had to do and I learned on the job. Whereas now we're seeing the development of college courses and even master's programs in Ireland in trust and safety. And not only that, we have the development of these professional organizations and learning groups like the TSPA and the OASIS Consortium, which I definitely think, it's showing that we're moving towards proactivity in the field as a whole, both educationally and practically too. So it's really great.
Yeah, I would add, and I think to Aoife's point, having sort of collectives, like the TS Collective, it's incredibly useful, especially for startups that are at the earlier stage of their journey. And we really benefit from just learning and tapping into best practice. And I look forward to a day where, so say, for example, for me now, when I'm looking at metrics, going by maybe the social networking industry or maybe like dating, I know the benchmark for what is good retention, but I'm really looking forward to a time where maybe I can begin to know the industry benchmarks for maybe for every 100,000 users, this might be the level of reports and incidents and things like that. So beginning to understand because I think a lot across maybe tech, we focused a lot, of course, on maybe growth metrics and revenue metrics. But I think, and I do foresee that in the future, I think it will be awesome if we begin to sort of know what the benchmark and what does good and bad look like, so that we can also know as operators what to aim for. And then I think maybe perhaps another sort of characterization of this shift towards proactiveness, I think there's now perhaps more media coverage around it, and that has led to like increased user or member awareness. Now, I think a lot of members on platforms now, they expect there to be sort of standards and consequences, and I find users that they can be quite involved. They'll want to know if my account was banned, why was it banned, and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what is freedom of speech on this particular platform. And I think now content creators, they have an awareness in terms of, well, I know I could maybe say this on one particular platform, but perhaps on Twitter, because different platforms have a different sort of tolerance in terms of how things are flagged up. And I think maybe this increased user awareness as well, they're sort of expecting the proactivity.
I don't have a lot to add. I agree, community is key here, but one fast fact: earlier this week I heard from one of our product leads that she was witnessing a user test, recorded user test. And this young user said, so wait, I can say anything I want here? Like and because she actually used the word redact. She said, I'm used to things being redacted. A young person is used to in other platforms having those guardrails. So that industry support from the big guys, from the big social media companies and stuff, it creates an expectation that we're all going to do something. It's just a lot more difficult for the smaller companies to make this case that we're talking about today, because the big companies have whole teams of people who do nothing but engineer that. So I hope we've helped make the case.
Yeah, I love all of this. So first off, a huge virtual round of applause for our panelists today. Very good job. We get the there we go. Thank you all for sharing your time, for sharing your expertise. I cannot say enough about whether it's TSPA, TS Collective. There's so many great professional groups out there. I encourage you to find them. Emily, to your point, most of these conversations, like, hey, I'm at a conference, I see you once a year, let's talk about X, right? And then we'll maybe send a couple emails or texts throughout the year, but these conversations are becoming much more formalized. And just the idea of knowledge sharing across trust and safety, it's always been a very collaborative space. And again, cannot thank all of you enough for your time. This is I'm geeking out on this stuff. I'm kind of enjoying it. With that, y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in to Making the Business Case for Trust and Safety, and y'all have a wonderful day.